Welcome to the second episode of the Bill Douglas Cinema Museum podcast series on item histories. For this series, we will be taking a look at items from the museum here on the University of Exeter campus, and we'll be providing context for each item, discussing their history and their importance to the museum as a whole. We are student interns, Chloé and Jess. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Chloé.
And we'll be taking you through the first two podcast episodes. And then afterwards, we'll be interviewing academics on items which reflect their own fields of interest in the coming weeks. So in this second episode, I'm going to be talking about Golden Age stars, specifically James Dean and Rita Hayworth. So just a little bit of a definition.
Yeah.
The phrase Golden Age is often synonymous with this period of like Hollywood cinema, the 40s, 50s, etc.
Right.
But the phrase Golden Age actually just means a period of time, sometimes imaginary, when everyone was happy or when a particular art, business venture, etc. Was very successful.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's just like...
You really do associate it with Hollywood, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that just shows the power of Golden Age cinema, the fact that we associate it solely, that term solely with Hollywood cinema. The time period is contested, but most people say like late 1910s to early 60s is that entire Golden Age period, which is actually so long, if you think about it.
Yes, it really is.
But in this time, in the Golden Age, the five major studios, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, Paramount, Fox, Warner Bros. And RKO, dominated the production of the moving image. From distribution, filming, everything, they had like the monopoly on the industry.
Yeah.
And one thing they did was they had stars, and they relied heavily on stars to sell their pictures.
Right.
So that sort of leads on to the items I've chosen.
Yeah.
And it's weird because I've chosen specific items for each star, but I think the star themselves is an item.
Yeah.
They're like a commodity. And we can actually never know them as human beings fully because there was such an image created around them, especially in the Golden Age, which I think the Golden Age is actually a nightmarish kind of time.
I can imagine, yeah.
Like there were big technological advancements, like sound, as you said, colour.
Colour, yeah.
There was these big advancements in the way that film stories are told, but the culture behind them is actually really scary and crazy.
To be a star would be really nerve-wracking.
Yeah, 100%.
Certainly.
100%. So I've chosen James Dean to start with, and he is, of course, he's become an icon, almost like a myth. You see his the iconography of the leather jacket, the red leather jacket from Red Wild Cause, cigarette in his mouth, the hair coiffed, the smolder, and you know it's James Dean.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah. Despite his short life, he had a massive impact on Hollywood. To the extent where the American Film Institute ranked him the 18th best movie star of the Golden Age out of 100 stars.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a really high ranking. The picture I've chosen is actually from Warner Brothers.
Okay.
Warner Bros. It's a copyrighted image of James Dean in black and white. And it's from... Here you go, have a look, Jess.
I'll have a look.
It's from his East of Eden production, I think, 1955.
Oh, yeah.
So this is probably 54, 55, that picture was taken. And what would you say, looking at it, how do you describe it?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because looking at it, as I can describe it,
Yeah.
it's sort of he's got a very smouldering look in it.
Yes.
He's got dirt on his face.
Yeah.
He's got this jacket. He looks like sort of a bad boy with a heart of gold,
Yeah,
doesn't he?
exactly.
That's how he's sort of pictured.
And I love that phrase. That is, I think James Dean lives in that duality of the bad boy with the heart of gold.
Yeah.
Like, he's the rebel, the disillusioned teen,
Yeah.
but he's also got something much deeper. At least that's the
How he's presented.
How he's presented. And these publicity images, there were so many taken of him,
Really?
and they memorialized him. Like they've etched him into history forever, and make people think they know him, like they know who James Dean is.
Yeah.
Even though they don't.
They
'cause
don't,
None of
no,
us do.
no.
And yeah, this image is just an embodiment of the phenomenon of who James Dean was. And we have so many photos like this at the Bill Douglas Cinema Museum. As well as photographs of James Dean, so of the time, 1950s photographs, we also have so many biographies about him.
Oh, really?
By so many different authors. There's one so weird by T.T. Thomas, I think, called I, James Dean.
It's called I, James
I,
Dean.
James Dean. And it's written in the close third narrative voice. And it's almost like, so he would say something like, and James felt in his heart that this, and it makes no sense because
Was he there?
you're there and you're not
Yeah.
him, but it sold a lot of money. It sold a lot of copies and gained a lot of
Seems
money.
like he's being used as a commodity to sort
Yes.
of icon. Yeah, like you say,
Exactly, become an icon.
become an icon.
And one famous example I've gotten from the museum is this 35-cent book called James Dean, a biography by William Bast, who was his friend. And the little tagline says, "The brilliant young actor's life art and life told by the man who knew him best. And I think that's just like...
Who gets to decide
It's a claim.
that?
It's a big claim.
Yes.
And actually, reading the blurb, it says, "Here is James Dean, as he really was, a restless, enigmatic artist in a passionate search for fulfillment, a reckless youth in a fatal race with destiny." It sounds like a film line. It's about his life.
It absolutely does sound
Absolutely
like a film.
crazy. But yeah, so that William Bass biography was super famous. And again, just all of this adds to the icon of James Dean, the star of James Dean. We'll never really know who he really is, obviously, unfortunately, because he's died. But we do have this image, this product. And it means that films like the 3 films he did...
Yeah, I was just going to say, isn't that insane that he only was in 3 films?
Exactly.
And this is the icon status we have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the craziest thing is that there are other Golden Age stars that have gone on to have really like lustrous, like long careers. And I don't know if they're as photographed as James Dean, as obsessed over as James Dean, as commodified as he is. But yeah, that's my example for the male side of it. The female side, I've chosen Rita Hayworth. Yeah. So in this same American Film Institute list of 100 best Hollywood Golden Age stars, on the female side, she ranks 19th.
Right.
So James was 18th.
Oh, very similar.
Very similar. But Rita Hayworth, I think even her name is an invention of Hollywood. Obviously, her real name at birth was Margarita Carmen Dolores Cancino.
Right.
Then she changed it to Rita Casino and then to Rita Hayworth. She was always in the show business with her family, like dancing. They were a gifted family. She was a gifted dancer for sure. And even though her role as the titular character in the 1946 film Gilda is probably her most well-known one. Here's an example.
Oh, yes.
There never was a woman like Gilda.
No, there never was.
Exactly, there never was. Because this is a construction, a Hollywood construction.
Absolutely is.
And as Rita Hayworth once said, that men go to bed with Gilda and they wake up with Rita, they wake up with her, to paraphrase. And I think that's such a poignant statement.
It really is that.
Because Gilda is a construction. I mean, look at her in this image, we'll describe it. She's wearing a silk dress.
Yep.
Form-fitting.
Very form-fitting. Smoking a cigarette.
You know. Her hair is perfect, perfectly placed. And yeah, she is this sex symbol, which I think I read an interview where it said that she didn't want to just be seen as a sex symbol, as most women in Hollywood didn't want to be seen as, but is what ended up happening. A big example of this is Life magazine.
Right.
The 1941 issue, her shoot, Rita Hayworth's shoot, it became famous. She was the single most famous and most frequently reproduced American pin-up image ever. I think,
like pin-up girl for army, yeah.
Yeah, for the army soldiers. I think apart from Betty Grable perhaps, but she's super popular with the troops because of this image that she has. So another item that I've chosen is this photo from the 1953 film Salome.
Oh, right.
There you go. And Rita Hayworth is playing Princess Salome in this. The reason
She's sort of being dressed, isn't she, in a way?
Exactly. Yeah. She's being dressed and there's like just this cloth between them. You can still see her form, like her figure. And I picked this image because, there's a darker woman dressing her, who's her maid/servant in the film. I watched the film and she looks more like she's white with darker features. But in this image, she looks like a person of colour.
She does look like a person of colour.
And it's just interesting because... So I went into a rabbit hole and did some research about these 2 women. And the actress is playing... Rita Hayworth's character's maid is called Carmen D'Antonio. And her roles include a harem girl in Arabian Nights, 1942 film, the Mexican woman in Black Gold, and a Pawnee woman / a Cherokee woman in another film.
So she's often defined by her race.
Exactly. And that's the role she plays. She's the exotic one, the foreign one, the other. And it's just interesting because her name's Carmen, Rita Hayworth's middle name is Carmen.
Yeah.
I was just comparing them and I just feel like this image does show the fickleness of race, but also what a chain it can be in Hollywood. We all know that Rita Hayworth underwent electrolysis to move her hairline upwards. She dyed her hair a different colour. When she was younger, this book by Neil Grant, it's a compilation of quotes and things from Rita Hayworth. And it says when she was younger, a director looked at her and was like, it's too bad she looks very Spanish and she doesn't speak English. And Rita Hayworth went up to him and, was like, no, I'm an American, and I'm actually learning Spanish, as in per her family's request, as well as tap dancing, this, that, and the other. But the whole point is that she kind of had this exoticism that had to be pared back slightly to fit into this mold of the golden age actress, and she reminds me of Gina Lollobrigida,
Yes.
or like Sophia Loren, like to the point where there's a bit of exoticness, but not too
Right.
much, to make the perfect kind of like sex symbol star figure, which is super interesting. But yeah, also one thing that was interesting is she said again in this Neil Grant biography that she had to shed her quote unquote puppy fat, but keep her voluptuousness.
So it's similar to, same idea. She's got to be herself, but she's also got to change herself.
Exactly. And it reminds me of the like Madonna whore complex to some extent.
Yes.
Like where you've got to be one thing, you've got to be like virtuous, all this kind of stuff. And also have to be like this sex symbol and the two, and just trying to make the perfect woman. Gilda, he doesn't actually exist.
No, absolutely.
So I found that super interesting. So those are the two items I've chosen. And even though there are multiple items, I feel like James Dean and Rita Hayworth themselves, unfortunately, are like a product of Hollywood of the golden age.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as a final question, same thing you asked me, Chloe. Why are these items important to the museum? Why do they relate to the museum?
Yeah. I would say having all these items in the museum is an act of preservation. And it says a lot about the film industry, how films were made. It says a lot about publicity, marketing techniques, how that's changed over time, but also about audience interaction and how audiences interacted with stars. Because as well as these stills that we have from Warner Bros. And what they would like people to see.
Yeah.
So how they would like people to see James Dean and how they would like people to see Rita Hayworth. There's also so much fan material of how the fans actually reacted to these stars, how they saw them. And biographies are an example of this, like how this Hollywood star was perceived by everyday people, the average person.
Absolutely.
Important to the museum, 100%. We have so much on the golden age. And I think it helps us understand more about the period of time from a modern perspective as well. Because one thing I was thinking about when you were talking in your podcast about the picture goers is that they started out thick and they got thinner. And so even though, yes, there are so many issues with like the early 20th century, there's also things that we've kind of lost, like this quality of magazine paper, and you can see that going down.
Little simple things like that.
And we also see what we've shedded in a good way as well. So super interesting to see just like power dynamics and actual politics as well within film. I think people think film's just entertainment.
No,
and that's not the
so
case.
much about the surrounding culture.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
That's why I chose this.
Thank you so much, Chloe.
No problem.